Okay guys, new lesson for today, talking about powers and exponents. And I guess the first thing that we're going to do in this lesson is just find out exactly what these two words mean. What is a power and what is an exponent? How do we get those things? What are they a result of? So, definition for you. A power says that a power is the result of a repeated multiplication of the same factor. So basically what that means is when you have the same number that's being multiplied by itself over and over again, that's when you get a power. So if I had something like 5 times 5 times 5. Okay, so this is what they're talking about when they say a repeated multiplication. So that means that something's being multiplied together, and because it says of the same factor, that means it's the same number being multiplied over and over and over again. So when you have something like this, 5 times 5 times 5, the result that we get is a power. And basically what a power is, it consists of a base and an exponent. So we would, instead of writing 5 times 5 times 5, we would write this as 5 to the third power. This entire thing here is what we call a power. And that's exactly the way we would say it, is we would say this as 5 to the third power. But the whole number itself is what we call a power. And then from that power, we get a couple other things. So I'm just going to rewrite it again here, 5 to the third power. And I just want to point out, this is where a couple other definitions come from. So the bigger number here, the one that we say first, and when we say 5 to the third power, we say the 5 first. This is what we call the base of the number. The base. Okay, and then this number that's written up above it here, and it's usually written a little bit smaller, and it's just up and to the right of the base. This is what we call an exponent. Okay, so whenever we get a power is made up of a base and an exponent, where the base, the 5, well, that's the number here that's being multiplied by itself. That's the number that keeps repeating. The exponent, which is a 3, that tells you how many numbers there are. So because there are 1, 2, 3 numbers being multiplied together, that's why our exponent's a 3. Okay, let's go ahead and do a couple examples here, see if you understand what's going on. Example 1, and again guys, if you think you understand how to do this, you can pause the video at any time and work ahead on your own and then come back and see what the answer looks like. Example 1, write each product using an exponent. So the first thing that we look at here, if I'm doing part A, which is 13 times 13 times 13 times 13, number 1, it has to be the same number that's being multiplied over and over and over again. And in this case, since everything's a 13, well, yeah, that's going to work for us. We're going to end up getting a power out of this. So because it's the 13 that's being repeated over and over and over again, the 13 gets written down as our base, and then because there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, that's how we know that our exponent should be a 4. So again, the number that's being used, repeated over, that's going to be our base, and then because there are 4 of them, that's what we get for an exponent. For part B, it's t times t times t times t times t. It's the same thing, okay? It doesn't matter if it's numbers like 13 or if we're using variables like t. The t is the thing that's being repeated over and over and over again. So that becomes our base, and then because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, that's where we get our exponent of a 5 from. So our final answer is t to the 5th power. Again, I always like to circle my answers when we're done. And that's really all it is, guys. So that's one type of question that's going to be expected that you know how to do, just how to write the power, how to write it as a base and an exponent. Second example, and really our last example, because not much to this lesson. Couple things going on here. It says example 2, write each power in words and as a repeated multiplication, then evaluate the power. So a couple of things going on here. They're actually asking us to do 3 different things here. So it says write each power in words. So basically what they're saying when they're asking you to do that, write each power in words, you want to write it out as a sentence just like you're going to speak it. So when I look at this power here, 2 to the 5th power, well, listen to how you're saying it. I'm speaking it as 2 to the 5th power. Well, that's what they want me to write down when it says write it in words. So I would simply write 2 to the 5th power. So they're going to ask you to write out in words. Okay, first step done. I wrote it out in words. 2 to the 5th power. Second step, it says and they want us to write it as a repeated multiplication. So that's kind of like we did back in example 1, where we're instead of writing it as a power 2 to the 5th, they actually want us to write this out. So again, my base is a 2, so that's the number that's being repeated, okay? And there should be 5 of them. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. The 2 is what's being repeated. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So that's writing it as a repeated multiplication. And then finally, the last sentence here, then evaluate the power. Well, the word evaluate, that's kind of a big word. We need to know that that means to solve it. So now they actually want us to figure out and get a final answer here. So if I just start doing this, I take 2 times 2 is 4. That 4 times 2 gives me 8. 8 times 2 gives me 16, and 16 times 2 gives me 32. So finally, my final answer is to solve it. But again, they want you to do 3 things. They want you to write it in words, did that, write it as a repeated multiplication, did that, and then finally evaluate, which means to solve it, get a final answer. We did that. So go ahead and try B on your own here. And then tune back in, and I'll give you, hopefully, the correct answer. Okay, so if I were to do this, I'll change colors here for you. Okay, when I read this out loud, I say 4 to the 4th power. So I'm simply going to write that down. 4 to the 4th power. Okay, so write it out in words, 4 to the 4th power. Write it as a repeated multiplication. 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. The 4 is the base. That's what's being repeated. There are 4 of them because that's my exponent. And then finally they want us to evaluate here. So again, if we just do this kind of one step at a time, I get 4 times 4, which is 16. 16 times 4. I'll do this off to the side here. 16 times 4. 4 times 6 is 24. Carry the 2. 4 times 1 is 4. Plus 2 is 6. I get 64. But then I have to take that 64, and I have one more 4 left here. So now I have to do 64 times 4. And, don't be embarrassed to write it out. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 6 is 24. Plus 1 is 25. So we get a final answer here of 256 when we go ahead and evaluate it. So again, 3 things that they're looking for. Write it out in words, did it, write it as a repeated multiplication, done, and then finally evaluate. Final answer is 256. Hopefully you got that. If you have questions, ask away. Ask friends, ask me. I'll come around and help. Other than that, that's the end of our lesson.